Welcome to Star Wars Action News, helping Star Wars collectors collect better.
But Andrew, as much as I love this Stormtrooper, you have something that left me in a pool of drool when you brought it down before Christmas. I think it was even before Thanksgiving, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Been a while since I've gotten to hold your quarter-scale Boba Fett. So why don't you tell us all about that to make me even more jealous and stalking Sideshow's site to see about that flex pay?
All right, yeah, so I'm afraid I may have gone and done something rather rash. You see, just over a year ago, during the Year in Review show here at Star Wars Action News, we talked about how Hot Toys announced their first Star Wars figure in their 1/4 scale line, and I said that I was not planning to add it to my collection of, at the time, pre-order confirmation emails. Well then, on the day it went up for pre-order through Sideshow.com, the quarter-scale Boba Fett figure ended up in my shopping cart. Now, I swear I must have blacked out at the time or something, because I never would have consciously purchased this amazing, detail-ridden, fully articulated giant figure. Never! At least that's the story I'm going with. Now, in that same Year in Review show, Arnie mentioned something about this figure that really kind of stuck in my mind and kind of ate away at me until that fateful day when I clicked the checkout button. We were talking about the actual scale, and it was mentioned that it was going to be in line with Sideshow's premium format statues, which for a while helped me steer clear because I had a couple of those statues and the size is really kind of limiting to my collection. But then, Arnie had to speak up.
And the difference being, of course, a Hot Toys quarter scale is completely posable. I mean, it's a figure. It's a giant figure versus a statue.
So I really like my premium formats, and this would be like that, but with the added bonus of being fully posable? Huh, click, sold. Now Hot Toys has been doing a decent job with their packaging in this line so far, but as a whole, since they're forced to stick with the same black format that Lucasfilm uses on all their high-end collectible lines, they have all been pretty bland on the outside. This one, however, is really nice. I mean, it's simplistic yet unique, and it's so big, the shipping box actually has a carrying handle. Now the inner box is the same black and gray pattern as all the others, but instead of showing part of the figure on the box, they just have a picture of Fett's bucket. Only it's not just a two-dimensional picture, it's actually raised up by a thin piece of foam to make it pop off the box and is really striking. Even the quarter-scale logo is a three-dimensional token affixed to the box. Inside, the insert that typically spans the entire length and width of the box is just a strip across the middle with an extreme close-up of his visor. A little underwhelming actually, but that might actually be to their benefit because once you take that and the insert board off, you're treated to Fett in all his glory, and boy, is he glorious. The packaging material itself is really nice too. Instead of just having formed plastic, they have this nice dense foam that really makes you feel like you're opening up a priceless artifact that's being unveiled for the first time. And the box is packed in layers. Instead of cramming a bunch of accessories in the tray along with a figure like they do in their 6 scale line, here, when you first open the box, you're just faced with the notorious bounty hunter and his extra hands. Really makes the figure the center of focus in the box. But now, let's actually talk about the figure itself for a bit. Now, I'm not a huge Fett collector. I never really hopped on the Fett fan wagon. I have some of his action figures, sure, but I've never been one to see him and immediately plop down my money for him. However, I will admit that in this case, bigger is most definitely better. This scale really allows for a level of detail that you just can't get in a 12-inch figure. There are tiny scuffs painted on the armor. The worn edges of his little shoulder cape fit the scale better here. And the sculpting details are incredible, down to them even putting a little Phillips screw head on his boot. Just astounding. And the stitching looks authentic in this scale and doesn't seem quite out of place like they sometimes do in the smaller line. There is really only one place where the scale just doesn't quite work for me. The whole figure looks to be a shrunken version of the real thing, except for the Wookiee braids, if that's what they're still calling him in the new canon. They just seem too thick, and I think it's probably because the rest of the figure is so finely detailed. If they could have found a finer material to braid them together, it would have helped, but as they are, it just kind of looks like a braided Barbie hair. Now the other area where I'll ding this figure, and this is a real nitpick, is the view from the back. All of his belts and sashes look great from the front, but they come together in the back in some kind of just gnarled mess. Now, I've seen pictures of his costume online, and they are just kind of knotted together, but with this figure, you have to arrange them just so in order to cover up this giant metallic clasp that I don't think is really screen accurate. Thankfully, the jetpack helps distract the eye away from the rat's nest, even if it is kind of a pain to attach it to the hooks on the figure's shoulders. But overall, this is one fantastic Fett. I mean, the paint detail is spot on, and all the little pieces that are on his wrist gauntlets and knee pads are perfect. His targeting rangefinder folds down, of course, and the gloves on his hands have sculpted wrinkles that really help them match the mold of the fingers. And a really interesting detail is that if you look up under his helmet, there's actually a sculpted chin under there. It's not painted or anything, it's just gray plastic, but it's a little detail that adds a level of realism if he has his head tipped up high enough or you're looking at him from a lower angle. One of my favorite detail flares are the little tubes that come out of his gauntlet and run up his arm and under his sleeve. They just look so cool and move nicely when you move his arm around. Which is another thing that I really like about this figure. The joints are ratcheted, so when you're posing him, they actually click into place and stay there. One of the things that I was a little worried about with a figure this big is the joints slipping over time as gravity pulls him down. Not a big deal in itself, but with a figure this large and heavy, that shifting weight could cause the figure to topple over and flush your hard-earned credits down the toilet. So it's nice that these joints are extra sturdy. But it does make it a little bit harder to move them, and there are warnings about applying too much pressure to some of the attached armor to avoid damage, so just be careful. Besides the articulation, the other thing that sold me was something that shouldn't come as a surprise to any of you who've been following my critiques of the Hot Toys line from the beginning. This figure has a base, a good base, a base that is dynamic, a base that is part of the display as opposed to just being a distributor of weight for balance. The quarter-scale Boba Fett comes with what looks to be a stylized version of the end of one of Jabba's skiffs. One side has a little plaque with the bounty hunter's name, and the other side has great blast damage details and a little railing. Thankfully, Hot Toys thought this through and worked in interchangeable base plates that allow you to insert the figure stand in two different directions so you can actually pose Fett facing either direction. But what else does he come with? Well, there's a plethora of accessories included, yes. I just wanted an excuse to say the word plethora. He comes with a total of 4 sets of hands, all in the standard poses. The jetpack, of course I don't really consider that to be an accessory. He also gets a bunch of little accessories that I've never really seen before since they're never pulled out during the movies and could have just as easily been sewn into the shin pockets. There's a little silver bar that I couldn't really identify, but there's also the survival knife, a sonic beam weapon, and an anti-security blade for all your infiltrating needs. He actually comes with 2 versions of his iconic EE-3 blaster rifle from Return of the Jedi. There's the full regular version, and then there's also the exact same blaster but cut off at the barrel to look like Luke just sliced through it with his lightsaber. An odd choice, really, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when he's posed like that without the context of Luke. Heaven help me if they come out with a quarter-scale Jedi Luke to complete the scene. Speaking of odd accessory choices, the exclusive version of this figure comes with an additional blaster that we actually had to do some research on. And I can't for the life of me figure out why it's included. I mean, this figure is definitely the Boba Fett from Return of the Jedi. Everything from the color of his jumpsuit, to the EE-3 blaster, to the fact that he stands on Jabba's skiff. I mean, it all points to Return of the Jedi. But for some reason, Hot Toys decided to include in the exclusive version a small blaster and holster that Fett has strapped on in The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I'm all for added accessories, but this just doesn't make sense to me. I could see them including the cutoff blaster as an exclusive just fine, but this Empire Strikes Back blaster just doesn't fit, and I'm never going to have it displayed on his person because it removes the level of authenticity that the rest of this figure provides. I don't know, it just seems like a waste. But really, the thing to keep in mind when you're considering adding this figure to your collection is that this figure really is large. I mean, not only is the figure itself large, but when he's displayed on the stand, he truly becomes the centerpiece of my Hot Toys collection. It will be interesting to see how it compares to the 6th scale Boba Fett, which is also the Jedi version, that comes out later this summer. And we already know that a quarter scale Darth Vader is coming, and its prototype was drool-worthy at Celebration last year. And a quarter-scale Stormtrooper was revealed at conventions last year as well. Now, even though this figure is truly awesome, I'm not convinced that I'm going to continue down this road. Not only are they pricey, but it also comes down to a question of space. Of course, I also said I wouldn't even be dipping this toe in the quarter-scale line, so I suppose only time will tell.
Oh man, those quarter-scale Hot Toys.
Now you sound like Sling Blade.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Some people call it a hot toy. I'll call it a holy grail.
Thanks for watching this video. You can see full episodes of Star Wars Action News with more collecting news and reviews at swactionnews.com. We also have thousands of toy and collectible photos in our photo gallery. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. May the pegs be stocked and the Force be with you.